what is going to happen is that we are going to see a United States of America which thinks that is losing its grip, and therefore whoever wins, it is going to be a time for activity in the continent of Africa.
Is Donald Trump revealing that the West no longer holds sway over Africa by doing what no previous US president has dared? Or is his hardline stance against Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali a reflection of the West's increasingly desperate effort to maintain its grip on the continent? The most intense phase may still lie ahead. What if these three small Sahelian nations are on the verge of disrupting centuries of Western exploitation and redefining global power dynamics? Something even whole continents have failed to achieve. Let's explore. Once seen as peripheral to global affairs, the Sahel is now at the heart of a major geopolitical upheaval. Countries long dismissed by Western analysts as impoverished and irrelevant, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, are now leading a powerful wave of African resistance. Their defiance is more than symbolic. These nations have boldly rejected Western dominance, cancelled exploitative agreements, and expelled foreign troops. Their people are rallying behind leaders who are unapologetically putting African sovereignty first. Now enters Donald Trump. Since returning to the White House, he has taken an aggressive stance toward these countries, viewing their actions as a direct threat to American influence. The harsh policies of his administration are escalating tensions, potentially sparking a confrontation that could reshape Africa's relationship with the West and the world. To understand this seismic shift, we must look at the roots of Sahelian resistance, the significance of Niger's dramatic coup, and how Trump's heavy-handed approach may mark the final chapter of Western dominance in Africa. So, why are these Sahelian countries boldly defying the West? The answer lies in understanding the long history of control over the region. For decades, the West has treated countries like Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali as little more than resource depots, rich in oil, gold, uranium, and raw materials, while their populations remained impoverished. But something has changed. Empowered by military transitions and widespread public support, their leaders have decided they will no longer tolerate the status quo. Their boldness is not impulsive. It is the result of years of frustration and a growing awareness that Africa gains the least from its relationship with the West. Take Burkina Faso, for example. President Ibrahim Traore, Africa's youngest leader, has become a symbol of resistance. He's openly condemned Western hypocrisy, pointing to conditional aid and military interventions that served Western interests while neglecting African security. Under his leadership, Burkina Faso has nationalized gold mines, expelled French troops, and begun paving a path toward genuine independence. Niger, too, has taken a stand, especially regarding its uranium reserves, which have historically benefited Europe while doing little for Niger's development. For years, Western companies extracted this vital resource under lopsided contracts. Now, Niger's government is demanding fairer terms that reflect the true value of its resources, signaling a major shift in how African nations engage with the global economy. Mali has followed suit. After removing foreign forces, it has strengthened ties with its neighbors, forming a regional alliance aimed at resisting foreign intervention. Culturally, Mali is also reclaiming its identity by reforming its education system to prioritize African languages and history over colonial legacies. This rising defiance wasn't sparked overnight. It is the result of decades of exploitation, fueled by the realization that Western partnerships often come at the cost of real sovereignty. The turning point came in Niger. The 2023 coup wasn't just a political shakeup, it was a quiet revolution. When General Abdourahmane Tiani seized power, he didn't just remove a government, he declared an end to neo-imperial control. In a speech that resonated across Africa, Tiani exposed Niger's lopsided relationship with the West, counter-terrorism strategies that prioritized Western security over African lives, predatory contracts, and a foreign military presence that felt more like occupation than cooperation. One of the most shocking revelations was that the US was flying military planes through Nigerian airspace, profiting from operations that had little to do with Niger's interests, without the country seeing any meaningful return. Gianni called this what it was: naked imperialism. The coup was widely supported by the Nigerian people, who viewed it as a reclamation of national dignity. Crowds celebrated as US forces were expelled, and the new government vowed to review all foreign agreements. This was not just about politics, it was about restoring pride. Washington, however, was alarmed. Under Trump's leadership, the US saw Gianni's bold moves as a direct challenge to its authority in Africa. Sanctions were imposed, aid was cut, and rhetoric became more hostile. But Trump underestimated the ripple effect. Instead of discouraging others, Gianni's actions inspired a continent-wide rethinking of Africa's ties to the West. So, ironically, is Donald Trump accelerating African unity? By trying to suppress Sahelian resistance, he may be giving it more power. The era of Western dominance in Africa is no longer guaranteed. Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali are forging a new path, and the rest of Africa is watching. Add your voice to the total liberation of Africa by leaving a comment in the comments section below. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more informative videos like this one. Let's proceed. Donald Trump's return to the White House has ushered in a new chapter in US foreign policy, one marked by a string of missteps, none more glaring than his approach to Africa. His administration has portrayed its actions in the Sahel as necessary responses to rising instability, framing them as part of a broader effort to reassert American influence on the global stage. But beneath this narrative lies a far more troubling and complicated reality. At the heart of this policy is Trump's decision to double down on aggressive tactics, a move that reflects a deep misunderstanding of Africa's evolving political landscape. The Sahel, long painted in Western narratives as a region plagued by unrest, has undergone significant change in recent years. Countries like Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali have taken bold steps to reject exploitative relationships and reclaim their sovereignty. Rather than seeing this shift as an opportunity for dialogue, Trump has opted for a confrontational stance, interpreting these nations' defiance as a threat rather than a chance to engage with them on equal footing. One of the most controversial elements of Trump's Africa policy is the appointment of Matt Gaetz as Attorney General. Even within US political circles, Gaetz is a polarizing figure known for his extreme views and inflammatory rhetoric. His involvement in the Sahel has proven disastrous. From his earliest public statements, Gaetz made it clear that he viewed Niger's leadership and the broader Sahelian resistance as anti-American. He openly suggested that the US should consider all options, including military intervention, to protect its interests. In one particularly provocative speech, he dismissed the region's calls for sovereignty as excuses for poor governance, accusing local leaders of fostering instability. These remarks were not only out of touch, they were deeply insulting to nations still bearing the wounds of colonialism and neo-imperialism. In the Sahel, Gaetz's rhetoric was seen as a blatant confirmation of the West's unwillingness to listen or adapt. His words became a rallying cry for African leaders and citizens determined to reject external control. The backlash was swift. Leaders and civil society groups across the Sahel condemned Gaetz's comments, describing them as symptomatic of a broader Western arrogance. Protests erupted in several capitals, with demonstrators holding signs denouncing US interference and calling for greater African unity. Social media lit up with hashtags celebrating the expulsion of foreign forces and affirming the region's struggle for dignity and self-determination. The fight extended beyond Africa. Gaetz's inflammatory stance widened the rift between the US and rival powers like China and Russia, nations that have positioned themselves as allies of African sovereignty. While Gaetz dismissed Niger's concerns, Chinese and Russian officials were offering support, branding their involvement as equal partnerships rather than exploitative arrangements. In this context, both Gates's strategy and Trump's broader Africa policy have done more to erode American influence in the Sahel than to restore it. By escalating tensions and dismissing legitimate grievances, the administration has driven African nations closer together in opposition to Western domination. This strategic blunder highlights a fundamental flaw in Trump's foreign policy: a reliance on outdated, heavy-handed tactics that fail to recognize a rapidly changing world where African nations are asserting themselves as equals on the global stage. Instead of adjusting to this reality, Trump and Gates have doubled down on confrontation, risking deeper isolation for the US in one of the world's most strategically vital regions. Trump's Africa policy is not just misguided, it's dangerously out of step with the times. By choosing coercion over collaboration, his administration has not only failed to regain influence in the Sahel, but has actively accelerated America's decline in the region. Relying on the economic vulnerabilities of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, Donald Trump sought to use coercion and force to bring these nations to heel. But rather than submitting, the Sahel has held its ground. These punitive measures have backfired spectacularly, doing little to shake the resolve of leaders like Abdourahamane Tiani and Ibrahim Traore. Instead, they fueled resistance across the region and amplified awareness of long-standing Western exploitation. To many across Africa, these actions are not seen as efforts to promote stability or good governance. They're interpreted as punishment for daring to claim sovereignty. By imposing sanctions on Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, Trump has unwittingly reinforced a growing narrative that the West is acting like a desperate empire, clinging to its grip on Africa at any cost. This perception has triggered waves of protest, grassroots mobilization, and mass demonstrations throughout the Sahel. Leaders once viewed with skepticism are now hailed as symbols of African pride and defiance. Citizens who were once divided have found common ground in their frustration with Western interference, rallying behind their governments in an unprecedented show of unity. But the ripple effects don't stop in the Sahel. Trump's hardline tactics have sparked a surge of continental solidarity the West did not anticipate. Leaders from Guinea to Chad have voiced public support for the Sahelian resistance, framing it not just as a regional issue, but as a broader fight for African self-determination. Take Guinea, for instance. President Mamadi Doumbouya has echoed the Sahel's call for sovereignty, stressing the urgency of breaking free from Western dependency. In Chad, a pivotal player in regional politics, support for the Sahelian alliance has grown stronger, with increasing calls for coordinated resistance to foreign interference. This unity is more than symbolic. It's reshaping African geopolitics. As African regional blocs strengthen, a distinct shift is emerging, one where intra-African alliances are taking precedence over reliance on the West. And the world is watching. Global powers eager to counter Western influence have seized the opportunity. Both Russia and China have stepped in to present themselves as true allies of African sovereignty. China, in particular, has ramped up its win-win rhetoric, offering investment and partnerships it claims are free from the political strings typical of Western aid. Russia, drawing on its historical ties with the continent, is positioning itself as a staunch supporter of countries challenging neo-imperialism. This creates a geopolitical nightmare for Trump. Rather than isolating the Sahel and reasserting US dominance, his administration has created fertile ground for alternative alliances. Alliances that are undermining America's standing across Africa. By interpreting the Sahel's resistance as a threat instead of an opportunity for renewed dialogue, the United States hasn't just alienated a few countries, it's begun to lose an entire continent. And therein lies the deeper irony. In its bid to re-establish control, the Trump administration has brought the very injustices African leaders are fighting into sharper focus. By cutting aid and enforcing sanctions, the US has inadvertently validated what African voices have been saying for years: that the West is more interested in preserving control than forming genuine partnerships. And now comes the most powerful twist in the story. The more the West resists, the more unified Africa becomes. The Sahel has become a symbol, a rallying point for a continent wary of being dominated. What began as a localized standoff has evolved into a pan-African movement for self-determination, one that could redefine Africa's relationship with the West and the wider world. In trying to isolate and punish, Trump's administration has instead spotlighted the strength of African unity. Whether this unity translates into lasting transformation remains to be seen. But what is clear is that Africa is waking up to its collective power, and the traditional methods of Western control are losing their grip. But what do Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso actually want? Despite Western claims, these nations are not seeking chaos, isolation, or conflict. They are calling for dignity, fairness, and partnerships rooted in mutual respect. They want sovereignty, not subservience. Simplicity, not dependency. In Burkina Faso, under Traore's leadership, the government is prioritizing self-sufficiency, restructuring agriculture, redirecting resources to domestic development, and investing in local industries. It's not a rejection of the West, it's a reimagining of the future, one where Burkina Faso can stand on its own terms. Meanwhile, Niger is demanding fairer trade agreements. Though one of the poorest nations on Earth, Niger's uranium has long powered Europe's energy grid, enriching foreign companies while leaving its own people in poverty. The demands from General Chiani's government for contracts that genuinely reflect the value of Niger's resources signal a broader shift in how African nations engage with the global economy. Meanwhile, Mali is taking a bold yet distinct approach by reclaiming its cultural identity through educational reform. By prioritizing African history, languages, and traditions over colonial narratives, Mali is nurturing a new generation that values sovereignty over submission. At the heart of these movements is a redefinition of international relations. These countries are not simply anti-West, they are pro-Africa. Their defiance is inspiring others across the continent to reevaluate their relationships with global powers. Could this rebellion spark a continental revolution? The short answer, yes, but it won't be without challenges. Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali have transformed from isolated rebel states into catalysts for change and symbols of resistance. Their actions, reclaiming cultural narratives, demanding equitable economic deals, and expelling foreign troops, are igniting broader discussions throughout Africa. From artistic revivals to economic restructuring, their influence is stirring debate in capitals across the continent. While Guinea, Chad, and Algeria publicly support the Sahelian bloc, countries like Ghana and Nigeria are watching closely, weighing the risks and rewards of challenging Western dominance. Many African leaders are now asking themselves, if the Sahel can do it, why can't we? Yet, this is no longer just an African story. These nations are actively challenging the existing global order. For too long, Africa has been seen as merely a supplier of raw materials and a passive participant in world politics. That narrative is being dismantled in the Sahel. Through their defiance, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali are forcing the world to acknowledge an Africa that will no longer be ignored, minimized, or exploited. Western powers, long accustomed to shaping African policies and controlling their resources, are now scrambling to adjust to this new reality. The African Union, often criticized for its inaction, faces mounting pressure to support this rising movement for sovereignty. The Sahelian revolution isn't just about political independence. It's about reclaiming Africa's voice in global decision-making, restoring cultural pride, and achieving economic freedom. It signals that Africa refuses to remain a pawn in a larger geopolitical game. The road ahead, however, won't be easy. Western nations have too much at stake to relinquish their influence without resistance. They are already resorting to strategies such as diplomatic isolation, economic sanctions, and biased media portrayals, painting the Sahel as unstable. Internally, countries like Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali must carefully navigate the challenge of dismantling neocolonial structures while building strong, sustainable institutions capable of maintaining their newfound independence. Another obstacle is potential disunity within Africa itself. While many countries support the Sahel's stance, others remain hesitant, either due to dependency on Western aid or entanglement with Western interests. For this revolution to become a truly Pan-African movement, the unity fostered by Sahelian leaders must spread across the continent. Despite these hurdles, the momentum is undeniable. The Sahel's stand has already ignited conversations about sovereignty and fairness far beyond its borders. In South Africa, activists are calling for a reevaluation of partnerships with Western corporations. In Kenya, debates are heating up around land rights and the influence of international agribusiness. In West Africa, calls are growing louder for a regional currency free from French control. This isn't just about reclaiming resources or removing foreign troops. It's about redefining Africa's place in the world. It's about asserting that Africa deserves to be seen and treated as an equal, not as a subordinate or dependent. So, with Trump back in power, will anything truly change? Can Africa confront Trump with a united front? And perhaps the most important question, can Trump challenge a unified Africa and still win? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. We explore the rich history, culture, and the ongoing struggle for sovereignty in Africa. Join us in this important conversation by subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you're not just staying informed, you're becoming part of a movement dedicated to reclaiming Africa's rightful place on the global stage. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Let's work together to spread knowledge and inspire change. Thanks for watching.